Hello, everyone coming in. Actually, let me make sure I shut my door. All right. That should be better. Let's do that. No, nope, we don't want to do that. That is how things will fall over. Yep, we'll keep it like that. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. Go down an octave. First official talking stream for the new soundboard. I guess so. That is true. That is true. Good to see you, Taryn. I wish I could play what I was listening to, but before. But that'll get us a strike on the channel. So, and we don't need that. We don't need that energy. All right. So, I can see you on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Thank you all for joining the Super Blerd Variety Hour. I am trying a new soundboard out. I have heard some mixed reviews, so I know it's not my mic, but the board, it may not be long for this world, so we'll see. So yeah, we shall see if I will keep it. And I'm also hearing like some things about echo, so if you all can help me out throughout the show, if you hear something, maybe I need to turn gain down, different things like that, we'll definitely try that. So we're still trying this out, trying to nail out some issues, and if I need to, I'll just buy a new board, or buy a whole nother board. Ideally, we would like to not do that because Nerdinian needs to save money, being a small company, and whatever money we can go towards promoting the site eventually, so we can pay people, get full-time staff, you know, that whole thing down the road. So yeah, the less we can spend on buying a brand new soundboard, the better. Or the Scarlet, the red, that one thing that goes into the computer with the USB, because I don't need to put another USB thing on this computer or it will lose its mind. We have a good show for you tonight. There's a very near and dear St. Louis issue that came up this week with a very good friend or good acquaintance. So hopefully in the future become a friend. We haven't met that much. But a local St. Louis local here that stirred up the internet with some old information, things that have been out there, their comments and things on it stirred it back up. The Ellie Kemper, so Ellie Kemper is from St. Louis. That's not who I'm talking about. That's a friend, Hannah. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, that association, and dive into the veiled prophet, why it's problematic. Yeah, so we'll get to that in a bit. I'll read some things from Vanity Fair. I'll read some of that Twitter exchange that happened there. And there's some great links I'll give you to for the St. Louis Observer. They're right up on the veiled prophets, which I think is excellent reading. And while I'm thinking about it, I will post that so we don't lose it. Tip it down. Actually, so let's drop all of this. So if you're on Twitch, you'll see this, and I'll have Taryn, if they get a chance, to repost that for everyone. So one is the Twitter exchange, one is the St. Louis Observer, and I think the St. Louis Observer one is better because Vanity Fair tries to act as if yeah, they're not the KKK. And I'm like, sure, that technicality gets them out of it. Sure. Okay. Because they've done nothing problematic in this city of St. Louis. But moving on. We'll get back. We're gonna get to that later in the show. And then I want to talk about Watchmen and Lovecraft Country. 3 years ago now. Is that right? Yeah. No, 2 years ago, 2019. Watchmen. Fantastic series. It kicks off with the Tulsa massacre. And it's content I didn't think people were going to tackle. And it's like, all right, this is what happens when black folk get their voice heard. Like, do I think Damon Lindelof could have come up with a... No. Okay. Now, just to be honest, no. Kenneth, back in that time period, did not have faith in Damon Lindelof, so there's no way I would have thought that he could have written that. But kudos to him for creating a diverse writing staff for Watchmen. And then Misha Green with Lovecraft Country, both tackling it in different aspects, but they're both tackling legacy. So I'll get to that more at the end, but I just really love that we have two shows that came one after another on the same network, both on HBO, and it doesn't feel there's so much material to talk about the Tulsa massacre that they didn't really like. Thematically, there might have been some similar things as far as like I said, legacy, but they didn't really overlap on each other. I won't dive too deep into the history of the Tulsa massacre because there's some great documentaries. Taryn put together a list of those. They're in the Discord right now. There's ones you go look up and watch. There's also the new PBS documentary that came out this month that you go check out. It's either already out or it's about to come out this month for the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. So they will do a much better job giving you the structure and the layout and time frame of the massacre and things that happened during it. And I also think the show's interpretation of those events is really good as well. So if you've not watched these two shows, you should definitely go do that. But I might recommend watching the documentaries first because I think it can make some of the moments in the shows more impactful. Or why those, like, there's clearly things on screen and make you understand why those moments are so impactful. But I think if you understand what was lost with in the Tulsa massacre on Black Wall Street, that can be a much more beneficial to your viewing experience. So we're going to end up taking a break next week for the quorum. So we're not going to end up. People might watch the interviews, or some people might end up watching the documentaries. Definitely recommend that. Yeah, y'all should definitely go check that and enjoy that out. But let's continue with Super Blerd. I am Commander Shipp, your host for the show, and let's get started with a bit of, like, again, it's sad that we lost our king, our warrior, the late Chadwick Boseman. As you know, he was a graduate of Howard University, and this was from a week or two ago, but just now getting into it on Super Blerd. But he will be forever remembered by his alma mater as the College of Fine Arts has been renamed in his honor. So, hey, Marjorie, good to see you. Thank you for liking the stream. But it's great to see that his old alma mater gonna honor him in that way. There's a litany of black actors, performers that probably could have been honored in that way. I think that is really indicative, or really a symbol or signifying how much of an impact he had in a very short time here. Because there was the pre-Black Panther days where we thought, is he going to do every black biopic that's available? And then I can't understate, and I can rave for hours and hours, what Black Panther meant in the black community in a pop culture way. And so, yeah, that is not a knock on, like, Denzel Washington giving plenty of money to the Howard University, different actors, actresses to their HCBUs that they grew up in or attended, and So I'm quite certain other folks could have been honored, but I think it's a sign of the impact that he had, what people were hoping he would continue to do into the future. Those are shoes that a lot of people just don't want to go in and fill. And yeah, So I think that's a great honor. I think it's a great way to give tribute to him and his unfortunately short career. But yeah. Oh, and I didn't get my photo of the king up there. Let me get that up there real quick. All right, so we're gonna go to sports ball for a little bit, but this has a tech crossover and Super Blerd Variety Hour, Blerds, nerds. It's not just movies, TV. We get into like tech, games as well. Why does this have to do with sports ball though? If you don't know, in the French Open, Naomi Osaka citing mental health issues, and I do want to be clear. From what I've read of Naomi Osaka's interview, and as I'm calling out Stephen A. Smith on ESPN, although I appreciated him coming forward with his own mental health issues and the things that he needed to work through, this is a longer rant, so I won't get into it too much, but we really got to stop saying mental health issues are a thing you work on and then you move on. That might be what it is for a particular person. If you're going through like a depression from losing a loved one, there might be some things, I've used that as an example, but there could be some things that temporarily change your status quo. And then you meet with a therapist and that gets you back to some sort of normalcy. It may not be the same way that you were before that incident happened, but it gets you back to like operating, living your life in a healthy way. That can be it. But it could also be that you have a chronic mental health thing that you're going to have to always deal with. If we think about folks that have ADHD, that is a thing you're always dealing with. The ADHD, even if you get medicine, the medicine might make it better for some folks. Some folks aren't able to take medicine. So there's not a guarantee that that's going to like make you neurotypical or like, that's a whole, again, that's a rant. And I'm going to tuck that in here for a moment. So I do want to make that clear that anyone that thinks that, again, it could be things that are dealing with like an immediate issue, like something that's come up in Naomi's life, and I couldn't tell that quite from the interview, or just in general, that these interviews are not been great for her mental health overall, and no longer wants to do them. Just with it could be a start of the French Open, but maybe this is going to be a thing that comes up in other tournaments. So I don't know that for sure. I'm not saying that they're going to call out of every single thing. And again, it could have been an incident, and it'd be like the French Open. I'm not interacting with you in this event. I will probably take these questions again coming up after that. And there's another thing we'll have a conversation on later, not on this show, but it'll be about the rights that journalists have to interview folks, because there was a great article I posted on my page that we are not the good guys, and when it comes to media outlets and media reporters, specifically in these instances. I'll see if Taryn can hunt it down, throw that link on there. It's a really good article. You should really read it. It's fantastic. And this toxic idea that athletes, again, I guess I'm throwing Stephen A. Smith under the bus again. And I'm not saying that he said everyone has he wasn't saying that people have to tough it out, but that is a common sentiment that folks have said, is that because you make X amount of money, because you knew what you signed up for as an athlete, that means you should be able to handle whatever's thrown at you from the press. And that's not true. That's simply not true. The article talks about, particularly in women's tennis, the degrading questions that women's tennis players get, the inappropriate questions that Maria Sharapova got when she was just starting out and was underage, and people were already asking her about her sex symbol status at 17 years old. Now, I could maybe understand that question in a closed interview with parents present, and they want to tackle and address that issue if it were becoming a problem, which it was at the time, and it still is. Like, if she wanted to tackle it head on, knew that question was coming, and was like, yeah, I'm actually upset that these things are happening to me. Asking it post-game, when your emotions are at their highest, and again, the age being what it is, that's not the time to have that kind of conversation. Or, I don't know, as a journalist, maybe you come to her defense and have that question, do that on your own and then call out to why that's problematic. I don't know. Just a thought. But where's the tech side of this? Really proud of, hate to say I'm proud of a corporation. That's not really what I want to say. But the popular meditation and sleep help app Calm has decided to cover the fees for any athlete that declines their media interviews for mental health. And again, alluding back to this past month, Naomi Osaka declined her media interviews at the French Open, citing mental health as the primary cause, racking up fines with the organization, and subsequently deciding to drop out after French Open officials threatened to cancel her games for refusing to speak. So one, kudos to Naomi for just getting out of it, being like, you're not going to tell me I can't do this. I'm just gonna quit the event. I don't need. Naomi Osaka is probably gonna be one of the number one tennis stars here for the next couple decade or so. So losing out on one French Open, I don't think it's gonna hurt her earnings, of course, but it is hurting her ability to succeed as a champion. And I'm hoping that her act. I hope it's cool that it's inspired this app, Calm, to make this stand with other athletes that need to do this for their own self. But I'm hoping that other folks would step in as well. Not that we need all corporations to jump in and help, but corporate sponsors, or people that help make up the earnings for athletes and WNBA, different organizations, like ad revenue is what drives that. You could very quickly squash this if companies that are the ones that also sometimes support or the ones that are backing the press conferences came up with a different model for how those interviews are conducted. Now, I get from a logistic standpoint that you have all the athletes there during an event, so it makes sense to like, hey, let's try to get these questions in, get their thoughts immediately while they're there. But how hard would it be to just let them go home, rest, get their ice, get the things they need to do to recover from their body, and maybe do that pregame? I don't know. Again, I wouldn't necessarily want to be distracted with questions pregame if I were an athlete, but I'm probably going to be a little bit, maybe in a better mental state before the game as opposed to afterwards, depending on whatever circumstance has happened. I'll bring up an example of Damian Lillard, who dropped 55 points in a losing effort, and repeatedly was asked about how he felt about his performance, and he did not care because he lost. He's like, not anything I did that was statistically significant as far as the range of the shots that he made and the historic. He did not care because we lost. While he was able to put it together there in that moment, if I were in his same shoes, I'd be pissed and wouldn't want to talk to anybody. That I put all my heart and effort out there, and it didn't amount to anything. So yeah, maybe we can come up with a different way. But kudos. I also give, again, can feel icky being giving kudos to a corporation, but I'll give kudos to Calm because they're putting their money where their mouth is. And if there's any synergy or any kind of it's like, this is like a no-brainer for this company. Calm being one of the stress mediation, sleep guide apps, I think is just a fantastic pairing. So it makes a lot of sense for them from a business sense, but also just kudos for doing something good like that. So hopefully other folks will follow suit. Let's see. Lindy Fitness said she's going to lose her number 2 ranking. Yeah. And it's a shame. That shouldn't happen, but you're right. It's a shame. Also for folks that aren't aware, not because of like retaliation from the French Open, just by virtue of not participating in the tournament, whoever wins it, you can probably usurp her position. So that's really what that is. So it's not a, I mean, it is a retaliation, but not like a direct, someone trying to do that to her. It's just more of like, you weren't in the matches, you didn't play, so you're gonna drop. Cool. All right. So a few weeks ago, we talked about Kirby Howell Batiste. If you know her, she played. Dang, I forgot what her name was in The Good Place. But she played the other data scientist in The Good Place that helped set some things up for Chidi and some eventual things he ended up using in creating like the different version of the afterlife, or like trying to create a study that would help them understand what they needed to do to help fix the afterlife. But she had recently been cast as Death in Neil Gaiman's live adaptation of The Sandman and was going to play Death. And in the graphic novel, Death is very much looks like a white emo character that you would come to expect. Cool. But last time I checked, it is also a Simone. Thank you, Taryn. But last time I checked, it's still a fictional character. So casting it differently is not the end of the world. But if you check Twitter, people lost their minds. That we had not gotten information on that when we talked about the story previously, but now we know Twitter's lost their mind. And it's comforting to see that series creator Neil Gaiman has come out the defense of this casting. Is very much for it. Even people that love Neil have been adding him on Twitter quite a bit, saying like they're ruining your project, and they're flabbergasted when he says no, they're not. He's like, I'm cool with it. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, I didn't write this inherently with the character being white. You mean also, it's Death. It's Death. Like, I don't know. Have y'all not watched Supernatural? We had Death change out. You know, we could argue about whether the performance was as good. That's a different thing. Like, I really loved the first person that played Death. I forget what his name is. So that's a different conversation. But the Death switching out and Supernatural, her being black, that's not a problem with me. If you want to have a conversation about performance, that's a different thing. Y'all are going bending over backwards to have problems with characters. The creator doesn't have an issue with it. The creator of the comic does not have an issue with it. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. You know, goodness, if the Schuster brothers came out later, if the Superman creators came out and said later, like, yeah, we're cool with Superman being black, would y'all still be flipping your shit then? Stan Lee was like, and Stan Lee didn't care about Spider-Man being black, but if he'd said the same thing about if they'd gone Miles Morales first instead of doing Peter Parker, you think Stan Lee would have been making a big fuss? Okay, and not saying either of these creators are perfect by any means. That's not what I mean. But golly, come on, folks. All right, we're gonna keep. Hey, this is a mental health positive episode, and I really like it because I get to talk about another St. Louis native who's not toxic. And this is Sterling K. Brown, and he recently gave an interview with Yahoo Life talking about the mental health journey his character Randall has been on in the show This Is Us. Now, I personally, it's just not a show for me. I don't really do dramas like that. Like, there's some dramas that people are like, hey, you should watch this. Hey, give me Damages any day. I'll watch that. I know it's kind of like thriller drama, but you know, yeah, I'll watch that. This Is Us is just not for me. But hey, I like seeing black excellence. Sterling K. Brown's racked up Emmys from this show. So you do you, boo boo. You go do it. And again, St. Louis native. I am not a St. Louis native, but I'm going to rep the city. So Sterling K. Brown is. So shout out to him, John Hamm, John Goodman, and we'll dig into Ellie here in a little bit. But I'm going to just kind of quote some things directly from the Yahoo Life article. So he's talking about his portrayal as Randall, and he says that I hope it's been impactful regarding Randall's mental health journey. I'm from a community of black men. We're talking about mental health with regularity. It's not the status quo. We're soldiering through, and handling your problems on your own is what is expected of you. A narrative from a very young age is that this world is hard. You have to figure out a way to make it through, to persevere. And it's never really been encouraged to say you can share this burden with someone. There are people who can help you go through trials and tribulations, and it's not something that you have to do by yourself. And I think Randall, even in his open-heartedness, him seeking out therapy was something that was very difficult for him to do. Brown continues, and the fact that he did and was able to find himself benefit, I surely hope that other people took that message and allowed them to also seek out help that they may need. So again, if watching this show helps encourage other black men to reach out and get mental health help, talk to a therapist, then I'm all for it. I guess that might be a further follow-up conversation about the reach of the show, like how many people are getting to watch it that are black, and they're taking that message. But even if it just helps anybody be more comfortable with that conversation, men in general or anyone be more comfortable with that conversation, I'm all for it. So shout out to you, Sterling. I like that. I like that you're able to dive into that. There was a follow-up conversation about some dynamics between him and Mandy Moore's character, his mom, in the show. I didn't really dive into that just because I don't watch the show, so I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel like I could really give a good, hey, here's why this is important in reference to the show. But specifically, he is an adopted kid in the show, and it came to light, or he's found his original, his like biological parents, and there was some tension there in the way that Mandy Moore's character handled that. So I'll be able to throw a link to that later if you want to read that. So if you're a fan of the show, we'll throw that in there so you can read that. But also thought that was really good. I don't watch the show, so I just didn't feel like I could give a good. Yeah, I could read the article, but I didn't feel like I could give a good grasp on that one. All right. So Taryn got to talk about this on the rundown last Friday, but I just want to bring it back up again. We're getting into the Koye series, Danai Gurira's character from the Black Panther universe in the MCU. And y'all, this is the energy we need right now. After losing Chadwick Boseman, this is the energy I need. I know we're getting Black Panther 2. I don't know what that's going to hold. But getting to see more of the Dora Milaje, I just... It's going to be beautiful. I don't even have any more news for you. I just have news that this is going to be a Disney Plus show. Time period, I assume, is going to be in the intermediary between Black Panther, Infinity War, Civil War, and stuff like... Infinity War, Endgame, stuff like that. I assume there'll be some flashbacks to how she started before she became Captain of the Guard. So I'm just... Best of luck. I'll be there immediately as soon as it starts. And along with some more Disney Plus news, Ironheart looks like it is going to come out. So that's the Rory Williams, our Black Iron Man series. Looks like that is going to come later in 2022. So expect filming to start later this year or the beginning of 2022 and come out fall of 2022. So on Disney Plus. So really excited about that as well. Boom, boom, boom. Where we're going next, man. So there's this little show on NBC about single people that are trying to navigate their lives in New York City. Stop me if you've heard this before. Oh, you think I'm talking about Friends? No, I'm talking about Living Single. You know, the show that predated Friends by a couple years. It was on the same network as NBC. And then that show got canceled after a couple seasons. And then Friends came out with basically the same premise, but it was all white cast. So that copycat show, that show that copied Living Single, had an anniversary or had a reunion on HBO Max. And showrunners Kevin Bright and Marta Kaufman gave an interview in which they were talking about the lack of diversity in the show, and let's read what they had to say. Given that I just gave you that Living Single premise right there, so I want you to keep that in your mind as you read these comments. And I could also drag David Schwimmer for his comments that there should have been a black version of Friends, and I will drag him. Because that's what Living Single is. We don't need a black version of Friends. We already have it. If you want to reboot Living Single, I'm all for that. But we don't need a black version of Friends because we already had that. It's called Living Single. But some folks are trying to give him kudos for the diversity efforts he pushed later in the seasons, and I just don't care. I would have rather Living Single just continue to stay on the air. But let's get to Kevin Bright, because this is not a photo of David Schwimmer. This is Kevin Bright. Let me read some things that he said in this article. With an interview in the Hollywood Reporter. When asked if casting all-white, heteronormative actors for the main roles was a conscious choice, Bright, an executive producer and director for the show, explained that it wasn't intentional, but that the chemistry of the cast spoke for itself. For the parts of Chandler and Phoebe, we saw everyone and we picked what we thought were the two best actors. There are different priorities today, and so much has changed. It's important for today's shows to be reflective of the way society truly is. He went on, but for our experience, the three of us, that may have been our experience that we were young and in New York. but we didn't intend to have an all-white cast. That was not the goal either. Obviously, the chemistry between these 6 actors speaks for itself. Bright added that he didn't have any regrets other than hindsight, and that it would have been insane not to hire the 6 actors who eventually secured the roles. What can I say? I wish Lisa was black, he said. I love this cast, I love the show, and I love the experience. I know Marta has a different feeling about it. I think it affects us all. And then, as he suggested, Kaufman did have a slightly different opinion. Again, it's still quoting directly from the Hollywood Reporter article. With the co-creator explaining there was probably 100 things that she would have done differently if given a chance. So let me bring up Marta super quick. I've talked about it in the past, and I do. So this is coming from Marta Kaufman. I talked about it in the past, and I do have strong feelings about my participation in a system, but it comes down to I didn't know what I didn't know. There are many things that I could say if I only knew then what I know now. Back then, there was no conscious decision. We saw people of every race, religion, color. These were the 6 people we cast, so it was certainly not conscious. They're not. I mean, they're not. I kind of can vibe with Kaufman's comments more than Kevin Bright's, because they are, again, they're white producers, white executives. They're going to cast what they're familiar with. Actually, let's go back to my Living Single comments. If Living Single had still been on the air alongside with Friends, I think we're kind of having a different conversation, right? If it was the friend group that happened on, if there's the friend group for that show, and Living Single was the friend group that had that, then great. But I think the other thing that needs to be acknowledged is that NBC in the 90s did not know how to market to black people, aside from the Fresh Prince. And that obviously had a lot more to do with Will Smith's crossover appeal with a bunch of mainstream artists than it did with Queen Latifah. Like, because y'all got to remember what Queen Latifah was considered. I'm not saying she was like a hard, like Little Kim. I was going to say Mary J. Blige, just not her. Missy Elliott. By the time she was getting on the TV and movies, that was starting to soften, right? She was moving away from roles like Set It Off. So while that image of her was, quote unquote, softening for the white mainstream audiences, she was still not seen in the same way as like, I don't know, name a black R&B singer. Just was not seen in that same way. So for her to be the lead on the show compared to like a Will Smith on Fresh Prince, they definitely thought it was more of an urban show. So it wasn't going to have what they thought the mainstream appeal for folks. So I can get it from a marketing standpoint for NBC. That doesn't make it right. Right? You think about how much the Friends crew got paid during the show. The residuals they're still making off of that show. And then you look at Living Single and you're like, it doesn't get nearly that amount of acclaim. Went through the classic TV bouncing schedule where it's like, where are we gonna sit you at? Towards the end of his life. It did have kind of a consistent spot at the start of its run. And I would argue that Living Single probably would have done a longer run if it had been on BET. I think just being on NBC was not the best spot for it in the 90s and with that particular crew. It's not a knock on Living Single. I just don't think NBC knew how to handle that properly, and it hurt the show. Getting back to Friends, I don't have a great answer on what they should have done, and it's easy to go back into hindsight and say, which again they admitted is that they would have made changes today if they made it today, and maybe if you're thinking about those two shows, other people to be represented in the show, be represented better in the show, it would have probably been as a diverse of a cast as you could have been. But I think there's some things I can immediately push back of. Is Friends representative of New York City? For certain friend groups, sure. If you're talking about a group of friends in New York for Friends, then yeah, that they represent some group like that. Does it represent the diversity of that city? Not by a long shot. Not by a country mile. Not by a city mile, country mile, nautical mile. No. Lindy Fitness says white people are going to have more chemistry with white people, obviously. Yeah. throw some brothers in there. I'm sure they'll be uncomfortable super quick. Clutching the pearls, clutching the purses. Mm-hmm. All right, folks. I am going to take off the blazer. Y'all can barely see it anyway, cut off by the half bottom part of the screen, because I need a little more air in the recording studio. All righty. Jennifer Aniston talking to black people would be painfully awkward and hilarious. Yeah. I also have some other thoughts about this show. I might save that for a different conversation. I just have strong feelings about Friends overall. I've never thought it was that great. That could be because of some living single bias. It could be that I don't think some of the jokes were written particularly well. You know, there's some shows that if you turn the laugh track off, still work really well because those jokes are just really well written. Friends ain't one of those. Friends is not one of those that I think does that well. There's some certain scenarios and situations that still hold up. But anyway, let's move on. So for my friends over at the Mary Sue, there's a fantastic article written by Brianna Lawrence. I was about to say Lewis. Brianna Lawrence. And it's a very simple concept. Let's just say this out together. Marginalized fans can have different opinions. That's crazy. That's crazy. What? You mean we're all not going to agree on the same thing? And I'm going to pull one quote out from this article. Definitely recommend you all go read it. It is fantastic. It brings up some issues that were coming up during Falcon and Winter Soldier, Lovecraft Country, Watchmen. Like they bring up their experiences watching those different shows and how people were reacting to it. Monica Rambeau's portrayal in WandaVision. Just really great. But I want to pull up this one quote from Brianna. Unless a story is a flaming dumpster fire like Sia's abysmal music and its dreadful handling of autism, the assumption is that the reception from marginalized audiences must be overwhelmingly positive with no room for criticism. Even if criticism, especially from the group creators are trying to represent, is key to getting better at telling their stories. It's a frustrating assumption that we have to like everything that got a marginalized character, that we can't even have different opinions on what we're given, even if it is supposedly made for us. Lindy Fitness will probably appreciate this. And folks that were going to watch Shadow and Bone in our quorum group. Yeah. Is that show diverse? Oh, yeah, it's got diversity coming out of its armpits. That doesn't mean the representations are that great. So are there going to be some folks that enjoyed seeing themselves on screen? Yes. And if you enjoy that, good. I'm glad that you got to see yourself. I love that. I can still say there's problems with Jasper. I can still say there's problems with the colorism happening just in that show. All right. We were talking about Lena Waithe 2 weeks ago. We were talking about the reason there's tension with her and her particular writing style and the things that she wants to portray in shows is that a lot of people don't want to see racial violence portrayed against themselves in a certain way. There's a way that's different than it's done in Watchmen and Lovecraft compared to like the horror series Them that's on Hulu that Lena Waithe created. So those are kind of like two ends of the spectrum. Even though they're both dealing with racial violence, they're handled in different ways in which a lot of black folks don't want to deal with that, don't want to watch that. It almost feels like torture porn for white audiences and not for something that black folks would want to enjoy. That's a different opinion. Or you could argue it's a majority opinion within the minority that's differing from the white majority opinion that this is fantastic. This is great. You all should enjoy this. You know, there's black folks that don't like Jordan Peele, that don't like Us, and don't like the movie Us, not the Us in general, or Get Out, and that is okay. They are allowed to do that. All right. I remember having drag out fight about Black Klansman because I thought it was amazing, and there's other folks that didn't like the cop narrative inside Black Klansman, even though it was a historical event, which I understand. That's totally fine. I thought Spike Lee was kind of co-opting that story, but I can understand if other folks like Boots Riley, who ended up making Sorry to Bother You, particularly had a diatribe against Spike Lee's movie. And while I didn't agree, it was a really well-sounded argument It's like this movie can almost be interpreted as pro-police. I get it. You're right. But telling us that we should like something because there's a black person in it, or this movie's diverse. What possibly, I've given a lot of love to Black Panther this entire show. There's problems with that series. That might be too much for this show. We might have to come back and do that next time. But it's also an MCU movie, so of course I'm gonna have problems. There's definitely still problems in it. Okay, good lord. I don't know. I guess it's Brianna, where I'm with you 100%, and I'm basically with you throughout the entire article. Where I'm really with in that particular quote I pulled out. The people can't have cognitive dissonance, and people will say, "Oh, they can't have it anymore." I don't know if we ever had it. I think there are people that strive to work towards that and live in that cognitive dissonance state, so they're just used to it. But I don't have this rosy view of like, oh, people had this before and we've lost it. It's like, please point out a time period where we've had that and successfully maintain that. I would love to know. I'm not trying to be snarky or sarcastic. I would really like to know, because if you can, I might give you a cookie, give you a whole box of Girl Scout cookies, if you can point that out. But definitely, Taryn dropped that link for folks on Facebook and Twitch. So definitely go enjoy that, read that. It's a really good article on that dissonance. Speaking of more dissonance, Lin-Manuel Miranda recently talked with IndieWire about his movie In the Heights, based off his Broadway play In the Heights, but got a really good quote on. Oh, what did I do? Did I do something? There we go. But brought up a really good issue regarding the Latinx word for pronouns, saying that. So basically, in recent years, debates, and this is coming from the IndieWire, kind of giving a synopsis. So for folks that are not aware, in recent years, debates have festered around the best term to describe people of Latin-speaking countries and territories, including Miranda, the child of Puerto Rican parents and a Mexican grandparent. But even this wordsmith hasn't settled on a specific term to describe his background. What you run up against are the limits of defining 32 different, he says the word fucking, 32 different fucking countries with one word. Literally no word is going to make everyone happy. However, Miranda noted that the debate over Latino predates the existence of Latinx and variants thereof. When I was in high school, every week the Latino club would debate Latino versus Hispanic. And he said now Hispanic has really fallen into the rear view, and it's all these variations on the rear end of the word. These include not only Latinx, but Latini, and the general neutral term more commonly used by people Latinx, of Latin descent in the LGBTQ community. And they specifically called Latinine is great because it's Latinos created. I'm cool with all of it. I use them interchangeably because I think the pie is still cool and it will never be perfect because it's trying to capture too much stuff. Yeah. So again, not exactly in my wheelhouse, but when I think about there's some black terms I'm not going to repeat on this show just because I've already used the F word. I can already tell this is going to get us rated higher on YouTube. So, but the N word, again, not as a gender neutral term, but it has gone through a history in itself. Ways to be called black, African American, colored, Negro. Dang, we're gonna get this video is gonna get hit. It's not gonna work. I'm surprised the feed had just cut out. So those weren't. I guess you could argue some gender neutrality within those anyway, but generally those have been. The black community has gone through different waves in how we interpret ourselves with those words. Specifically, there's been time periods where those have been derogatory towards us, and then we co-opt them. So while those histories are not the exact same as Lin-Manuel is talking about, but that constant evolution of a word is very much true in both communities and how we choose to grapple and wrestle with it. So when he was talking about Hispanic versus Latino, so as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, okay, I'm hearing very similar things. But his comment about the 32 countries as well is like, it's the same thing when we do like Asians, Pacific Islander, and just group a bunch of people together. It's like you're missing a lot of nuance when you do that, and it may be logistically easier. But it definitely it may be like, and again, I put logistics in quotes, easier to put people into a particular box like that. But you are missing a lot when you do that. So again, trying to having white, and I have to call out white progressives specifically. And I'm not saying that Latinx is not being adopted in the Latin community at all, because obviously there's people that are picking it up. But having white progressives press that as a, like, this is the term we will use without consulting the community that you're trying to use it within. And then going into the 32 country note that Manuel brought up, that's an issue. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it at your doorstep. I'm going to let you marinate. I'm going to let you think on that for a little bit. But because I've never had people try to press terms on me as a black guy. No, that's never happened. Nope. Not in the slightest. I also think people should know that, like, that criticism doesn't mean that they're not accepting of the term. There might be people that are unaccepting of the term because they don't want to accept that as a reality. That's the difference between it being bigoted and or someone stepping on your actual culture. So someone is recognizing binary and non-binary people, and they're just saying, I don't know if that's a term that, like, as us as a community in our heritage, maybe we've already had a term that's being used and y'all are not recognizing that. That's a different conversation than someone that's not recognizing someone's basic human rights to be non-binary. Those are two different conversations. So that's latter one's not what's happening here. Just to be clear. All right, let's move on to a panel that happened let's see, with some young Disney stars, or Asian American Pacific Islander stars, Peyton Elizabeth Lee, Karen Barar, Sway Bhatia, and Layla Ladner. Recently did a Asian Pacific American Heritage Month panel with Disney Plus. They did this with Entertainment Weekly and Gold House, and just really got to talk about the first times they felt that they'd been represented in Hollywood. Let's see. So Lee, I'm going to quote Lee directly from the article. I don't remember having distinct Asian heroes in my life or seeing people on screen that I really related to on that level. So Lee is starring in the Doogie Howser reboot, Doogie Kama Aloha, MD. But specifically said that Crazy Rich Asians changed that. She wanted to be Gemma Chan. Also, shout out to Gemma Chan getting ready to star in a big role in the Eternals. So really be excited to see that. And quoted again from the article, for Mighty Ducks Game Changers star Sway Bhatia, though it was different because she grew up with Bollywood. I had a whole world of people that I was able to look up to. It may not have been in this country that I'm currently in, but just having something like Bollywood that I could look up to, it's full of people who look like me, citing Priyanka Chopra as one such example. Taryn, and thank you for putting that on those links up there for folks. So that's Layla Ladner, and then Sway Bhatia. Karan Barar, so Mighty Ducks, and then Peyton Elizabeth Lee getting ready to play in the Doogie Howser reboot. So the rest of the interview is really good, getting their insight on that. So definitely recommend you go check that out. Taryn, again, thank you for posting those links on Twitch and Facebook, and we'll keep moving. But I have to say this multiple times. When people say representation doesn't matter, these interviews are the first time they're getting to see that. Crazy Rich Asians came out a couple years ago. Again, I know these are younger performers, so but they've already talked about that they didn't have a lot of representation, even they were growing up. And this is in the aughts, the early millennium aughts time period. And one of the first examples they're able to give is either Bollywood in their home country of India, or Crazy Rich Asians. That's not a great selection. So, yeah, when I shout until I run out of breath and just can't speak anymore, that representation matters and seeing yourself on screen matters. This is what I'm talking about. Because it's a shame that as far as we've come, that the only examples they can have right now, and that's, to speak again of Chadwick Boseman, people wonder why that's such a heartbreaking loss, is because people say, well, you had Blade. I can speak for a while. You know what, Taryn, I'm gonna make that a note. I'm gonna make a whole show. Why Blade is not the representation that you think it is, particularly in the black community. I'm gonna do that. We're gonna talk about that. But there's a reason people flocked to Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther as opposed to Wesley Snipes playing Blade. Subject matter can also have a huge effect on that, not just seeing yourself on screen. So that goes back into the differences of why some people that there can be differences in how we see ourselves on screen, what words are coming out of our mouth. If you get a black person up there, but you're just spouting out nonsense that a white person wrote for you, that's not much better. Now you're just being Uncle Tom, being puppeted around. Okay. All right. Let's see. We're almost on our last news thing, and then we'll get to our main topics. Start wrapping it up for tonight. Instagram stories change amid some issues in the algorithm. So Instagram is making a change to its algorithm after employees raised concerns over the reach of pro-Palestinian content in light of the recent deadly confrontation between Israel and Palestine. So Financial Times gave a report about this is published on this past Sunday, and states that the change will affect original and reposted content in Instagram's stories section. So these are kind of the temporary blurbs that you can put into a collection on your own Instagram, but typically kind of stay up there for 24 hours and then either drop to a collection you've made or disappear. So they affirmed that until now, Instagram had favored original stories over stories that reshare posts from the user's feed or someone else's feed. So unless you were one of the original people posting that, maybe if you were in Palestine and originally posting this, if someone was trying to reshare that and also put more attention to it, those things were getting kind of down voted effectively. Going forward, Instagram will rank original reshared posts on the same level. So as many as 50 employees inside of Facebook, which owns Instagram and WhatsApp, expressed their concerns about pro-Palestinian content being suppressed. And BuzzFeed also reported on this that they've been filing internal appeals to restore content on Facebook and Instagram they believe have been improperly blocked or removed. Let's see. So shout out to the employees there making that known to their leadership, getting those changes actively. It's not getting pushed down the road. It's effect, from what I understand, it's effective now. So those changes have happened, and again, that may not have been a intention to target those, although that might take some more research to see okay, even for folks that reshared content, if it was reshared pro-Palestinian content, was that the only thing getting suppressed, or was there tons of other things that were being reshared that got suppressed? So that's the one thing I don't know, but and it could also just been the heightened sense during those last couple weeks as well. So that's something I don't know for right now, and I'll definitely get more info on. I mean, if I had to guess, given the way these companies have worked in the past, if I had to guess, I would be surprised if that wasn't the way that it worked, and it was just that specific content genre that was getting targeted. But yeah, really, I want to give a big shout out. Again, I don't know most of those employees' names. They were talking anonymously to BuzzFeed and different folks that were put together for an article. So, and then Instagram Instagram and Facebook declined to comment specifically on those changes. So this is very much from an internal conversation or people reporting to BuzzFeed. But shout out to them. I think that's an important thing, regardless of where you come down on in that conflict. But I definitely think all information that's available on that needs to be put out, and not with a bias or propaganda spin from either side. It's like, get as much of those stories out as possible so that people can make a informed decision and get spun up better on the conflict. Because a lot of people just want to copt out and just pick one and be like, and I'm good. This is the side I support. And you wish it were that easy. All right. So, I teased a St. Louis connection to start the show. And we are now there. And we're going to talk about Ellie Kemper. Grew up in the St. Louis area. You'll probably know her most famously for her role in The Office and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. As a comedian and comedic actor, I think she's fantastic. But that doesn't mean folks don't have skeletons in their closet. And a while back, a couple years ago, it was brought forward to folks' attention that she was part of a pretty crappy cotillion organization. And that's not to throw cotillions under the bus. I'm not saying cotillions are associated with the KKK. I just bring it up as an example of a, not necessarily a secret organization, but just like a prim and proper, your kids learn manners, things like that. You dress up, the guys wear tuxes, the women wear dresses. You go do dances and things. The parents are chaperones and stuff like that. So that's what the harmless version of this would be. Just a coming of age organization. That's what the harmless version of it would be. And I'm quite certain that there's probably kids in this that don't really understand what they were a part of. So I do want to defend necessarily like hey, when you're a kid and you're under 18, you don't have control of your life. So if your parents say jump, you jump. And if you have to go to this thing, you go to this thing. So I definitely understand there's probably kids in this thing still right now that are dealing with this. And there's tons of, even if it's not the veiled prophets, which we'll get into in a moment, even if it's not them, there's tons of different things like this that put kids in a position where you have to take on certain traditions and things that you don't have the autonomy to like process and understand for yourself why this would be an issue. Now, Ellie Kemper is a grown adult, has been in the media eye for quite a amount of time, and this has been out for a while. So they've had plenty of time to have addressed this within themselves and process what they were a part of and talk about the problems with it. So for folks that are coming after her, there's ways to go at someone. So if you're getting out of line, I'm not supporting that. But sorry, Ellie, you've had time. You've had time to tackle this. I'll probably also do a Talk to Me on this. If y'all are not aware, Talk to Me is my music show where I DJ for a little bit and talk about social issues. So I might dive into this more on that. But specifically for the entertainment piece of this, like, I think when people talk about cancel culture and saying that it's like extremely harsh, not forgiving, I actually think that's not true. There's a lot of opportunity for you as a public person in the public eye, as a public figure, to come forward with things that have happened in your life, ways that you've grown and changed, and that we generally, if you do that, we got your back. There's plenty of stories like that. What the public doesn't seem to be able to process or handle well is like you not saying shit. When you don't own up, and if you don't talk about the work that you've done to get past a particular thing or an old bias, or because, hey, I don't know if you know this, but there's plenty of progressives that used to be conservatives that are now your media darlings. People that have changed and switched sides, and not in a switch sides way. I don't mean it like that. Or even conservatives that aren't idiots that may like politically say like, I believe in these specific conservative policies, so long as they don't like, and they could list off the social issues like, yeah, but I believe abortion is a right that should be made. Like, there's people that are, hey, going back to cognitive dissonance, they've done that work. So there are still people out there that exist that, like, not still people, but like there are people that exist that can have done that work. And I believe, honestly, if we go back through that history, we've had their back from them doing that. But again, in this case, you don't say anything. You haven't done that work. And this is coming up again as a problem. You know, if this was a young star that was in 17, 18, just getting into the business, hadn't done that work yet because they're 17, 18 and still probably just still under their parents' thumb and don't know about this, don't really understand what they were a part of. Yeah, I got you. If anyone comes after you, I'd be like, hey, we're going to walk you through this, but I understand. Having been a Christian kid, gone for a bunch of other things in my life during that time period, I get it. If there's anyone that get this, not this exact brand of, but I get it. But for folks that are confused, what are the veiled prophets? So, or how did this come back up? Right? You're like, if it's already been out, how did it come back up? So, So this says the internet became aware of Kemper's connection to the veiled prophet ball after Twitter user The Hannah. So shout out to my friend Hannah here in St. Louis. You're internet famous now, Hannah. They were responding to a Twitter user, WB Baskerville's tweet about the existence of the veiled prophet ball. So Baskerville was talking about the fact that they got, or actually, let me make sure I pull it up. I'll say it correctly. Every once in a while, I remember that the veiled prophet ball exists and that everything True Detective season 1 was about is real. So go watch season 1 of True Detective, but basically a cultish organization, something like the Skulls, not necessarily a secret organization, but things that does some shady shit. Definitely can operate. Lavender Bolshevik commented on that, asked, what is the veiled prophet ball? To which the Anastasia commented, a fancy event put on by our local KKK, of which Ellie Kemper was once the queen of love and beauty. That is a title given to that year's queen of the ball. And the Atlantic does a really good write-up on it. I earlier posted a link to the St. Louis Observer, which also gives great ties to Tashara Jones, our current mayor of St. Louis, and her father, Vervis Jones, and things that he did in his tenure to help start squashing this organization's public outings and public availability and events they would do. And the St. Louis Observer article recommends, the title is called Dethrone the Prophet, and talks about things that Tashara Jones, currently our mayor, could do that would help limit this organization further. Specifically in the city of St. Louis, they could obviously still operate in St. Louis County or in the state, but saying like effectively that you're not going to do this event or this public parade, right? Because there's multiple facets of it. There's the parade, there's the party involved with the veiled prophets, along with the crowning of the king, crowning of the queen, whoever the veiled prophet is for that particular year. The St. Louis Observer article also talks about how one of the prophets in 1979, I believe, was exposed by a local. It wasn't an NAACP group, but it was the St. Louis Action Group here, basically our Black Civil Rights Action Group here in St. Louis. And one of the organizers for that, the article says, pulled a Ocean's 11 style heist to expose who their prophet was at that time. So why are people calling it or why did Hannah call it our local KKK? So Vanity Fair article would say that's false, or said technically that's false. Maybe that's where I'll save this for Talk to Me and bunch of that more. They are saying the group has no affiliation with the Ku Klux Klan, but the group's history is still deeply problematic. Sure, Vanity Fair. Sure. But we'll get into that. I'll go ahead and read theirs. The Veiled Prophet was co-founded by former Confederate officer Alonzo Slayback and his brother Charles Slayback. Per St. Louis's Cultural Resources Office, it was created by the town's white male community leaders, which, as boot camp pointed out, in the Atlantic came a year after the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, when black and white railroad workers joined forces across the country in protest of poor pay and working conditions. When the strike reached St. Louis, where almost 1,500 railroad workers banded together to halt rail freight for a week, with their demands including an 8-hour workday and a ban on child labor. I don't know if you follow me on TikTok, but I just covered this conversation as far as like the 8-hour. I'm going to get back into that. I took a break on the minimum wage. I'm going to get back into that. This is why unions are important. Are there corrupt unions? Yes, but we can get into that another. But generally, on the up and up, unions are important. This is why. Let's keep reading. The strike eventually ended when 5,000 recently deputized special police joined with 3,000 federal troops in forcing the strikers to disperse, killing 18 of the strikers in the process. The initial goal of the veiled prophet organization Beauchamp writes was to take back the public stage from populist demands for social and economic justice. It did just that in its inaugural event, the Veiled Prophet Parade of 1878, a 17-float display celebrating St. Louis's wealthy elite. That sounds awfully familiar. Take back the public stage. I don't know if you could. I don't know if you've read KKK pamphlets from the Reconstruction era. They're more inflammatory than that, but I mean, if corporate asks you to look at the difference between these two photos, it's the same photo. Vanity Fair does continue to go on to this next paragraph about the KKK connection. Again, while it was founded under the auspices of class control, and they say it has no direct ties to the KKK, it says it likely stems from the similarities between the veiled prophet's robes depicted in a newspaper illustration printed on October 6, 1878, and the white robe and pointy hat of the Klan uniform, which the KKK started mass producing in 1921. This is where I'm going to push back against Vanity Fair, because the veiled prophet uniform, so they talk about the mass-produced ones in 1921. They're missing the Reconstruction time period, KKK. This is why the veiled prophets are hella problematic to me, because they look like Reconstruction KKK members. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I don't think people were just coincidentally dressing like the Reconstruction KKK and then being like, but it's okay. Right. And then they finish says they don't burn crosses, so why are they problematic? Let's see, in 1979, just over 100 years after its founding, the Veiled Prophets started accepting black members, placing it somewhere between the U.S. public school system and the Augusta National Golf Club in the race towards integration. However, the step towards inclusion came only after black activists and civil rights groups had frequently picketed and criticized the Veiled Prophet and its ball for being racially exclusive and elitist. In 1972, a St. Louis social justice group called Action Council to Improve Opportunities for Negroes, here's what I'm talking about, the unmasking, to infiltrate the ball and unmask that year's Veiled Prophet, who turned out to be Thomas K. Smith Jr., then a vice president of Monsanto. And super quick, I won't get into the Aaron's already dropped the Vanity Fair article, so I won't necessarily reread all that verbatim. So the direct KKK ties, I think St. Louis Observer article does a better job on that. I won't pull that up right now. Let y'all read into that. But it has been a maybe this is a more succinct way to say the problem with it. It has toxic origins. The clientele, the families that are part of this, have not done the work to cleanse this organization of its issues. It's almost in a similar way of the Confederate flag users, people that use that in the South right now. Is that I know what that may mean for you when you say that it's your heritage and you're saying when you're saying Southern pride. So I mentally can separate out Southern pride from Confederate culture, but the Venn diagram is pretty small. And the things that make up Southern pride and make up ideals of the Confederacy They overlap way too much. So what you're trying to hold on to, it's like, if you're thinking about being able to make social contacts amongst the wealthy elite, there's other organizations that do that. Go join a fraternity, sorority, if you want to do that. Or hit some other Kiwanis club or something like that. You could do it outside of this. The actual goals and things that he espoused for the organization and ball aren't necessarily toxic today. No. Has it gotten more integrated? Sure. But I don't see, from what I've read from this, I don't see black folks flocking to go to the Veiled Prophet Ball because they've been kept out of it for a considerably long time. What was the date again? 1979 was when they first started allowing black folks into the organization. So yeah, when you have a long history of that, and the members of it have been perpetuating that, may still be perpetuating that today, it's not really a space that minorities want to be in. Even if you're a wealthy minority in that sphere, it's not necessarily a space that you want to operate in. So coming all the way back to Ellie Kemper, and again, this is something I'd like to dive into more because the Veiled Prophet is not the only organization like this in the U.S. Maybe I'll do a Talk to Me show where I do a roundup of this nonsense. But getting back to Ellie Kemper, the reason I think you could be blinded by the issues of this is that you don't understand the oppressive nature that's inside of this, or why folks don't want to be in that space. So, like Lindy Fitness said, they don't burn crosses, so why they're problematic. Again, they're not necessarily doing outward acts like that, and we have not necessarily like shown that there's been like KKK leaders inside of it. Although, read the St. Louis Observer article about other folks that have been involved with it. Again, that Venn diagram is very shallow. It's very small. It almost looks like it almost looks like one circle. Folks that were racist, wealthy elite, operating with like progressive, wealthy elite. So going to Ellie, I can see why you'd have issues being able to parse out the problems if you think of this just as like some kind of debutante ball and a bunch of old white geezers get together that have money and talk about ways they want their kids to succeed, make the handshake deals, and so on and so forth. So even if it's not outwardly racist, it is definitely going to have issues and where people don't have access to get those kind of deals and conversations, and they're wondering why this thing got approved seemingly overnight because these folks were in this club and they were able to grease those wheels. So even if we take the problematic history away for a moment, there's a lot of real world issues with clubs like this in general and what they allow folks to do without a lot of public discourse. So that's where I'll leave it for now and have a longer conversation. But for folks that are like, I don't get the KKK association, it's not that it's loose, is that they both operated in similar ways in their inception and the way that they started. Definitely the KKK is a terrorist organization. Veiled Prophets, I'd argue, were in the beginning. They may not be that today. Probably as docile as the current KKK members, with the side of like actual alt-right members. And but that doesn't mean they're any less clean or saintly in anything they're doing today. So they still got problems. So if you want to continue having this conversation, I will take it over to Talk to Me sometime this month and chat about that more. And definitely would love to like bring in more details on that and more things I've read on it. But shout out to Hannah. Really cool to have that St. Louis connection. I get to do it sometimes in media as far as like someone that gets covered. So that can be really cool. It's nice knowing like, hey, someone I know sparked this up. That is fantastic. I love it. Bring in the attention. Bring in the rain. And again, Taryn, thank you for dropping those notes for everyone so that we could talk about that. All right. And let me go one more thing. Lenny Fitness says, to clarify, I feel like they're problematic, but that's a sentiment a lot of white people have. Yes. Yeah. It's like, well, they're not doing this, so they can't be that bad, right? That's not. That's not the flex you think it is. That's not the flex you think it is. Ooh. So the past. We'll move on to my final topic of the night. So, the Quorum, our amazing Quorum, has been rewatching. Has been watching the Watchmen. And if you don't know, Watchmen starts off in the midst of the Tulsa race massacre, as Black Wall Street is bombed. And that's why, if you wonder why I eyebrow raised at the deputized part, and we were reading the Veiled Prophet part of Vanity Fair, that was a common thing that would happen with lynch mobs and things across the South and in the U.S. in general, is that whether you were an actual KKK member, the police could deputize you to help take down a race issue or race riot or anything they deemed anything they deemed had gotten uppity or out of control, right? So I'm not saying deputizing as a function is inherently racist, but it's typically been used in a very racist way and to support and enact racist and oppressive actions throughout America's history. So that's why it raised the eyebrows for me in that article, and that's what Watchmen depicts in the beginning, is that you have plainclothes folks, you have people in KKK robes, you have people in officer robes working together to make this riot happen. And y'all wonder where the trust issues for the black community comes with positions of authority. But that's none of my business. Where's my teacup? Longer conversation. And then Lovecraft Country, maybe, comes about it in a different... Actually, not the photo I wanted to show. I do like that scene. I'll talk about that in a second. Lovecraft Country comes at it from a different angle, different part of the riot the massacre. Riot is really not the right word for that. Massacre that occurs there. And I talked earlier about legacy. So in Watchmen, Regina King's character Angela doesn't really know her history. Echoing a theme of black history throughout all of American history, is that because of slave times and records that were kept, trying to understand where you came from just the American time period, and let alone understanding from America to Africa connection is extremely difficult. Go read The Color Purple. That's an entire conversation that happens in that book, trying to reconnect with past children or reconnecting with their African ancestry in that book. We can get into that has been a very common, not just in the pop culture, but just in African American history of trying to understand where you are from, where you're actually from, not where the boat dropped you off at in America, but where you actually from, who are your tribe, who is your kin, in that manner. So that has continued in both of these, in that Watchmen goes more of almost zero knowledge of it, and how that lack of knowledge is affecting your current life. And then Lovecraft Country, diving more into the secrets or the actual power that you've had throughout the ages, which gets me to that scene in the fire scene in Lovecraft Country. If you've not seen it, I won't spoil everything that's going on in this. I won't spoil really what's going on in this scene. But when you get to this moment, if you I raved about this. I was jumping up and down when this scene came on, because one, I just don't get to see magic stuff happen. So Watchmen's definitely more superhero oriented, with Dr. Manhattan, some superpower there, and then but mostly grounded, not a lot of superpowers aside from Dr. Manhattan. And then Lovecraft Country is Indiana Jones, Goonies, Supernatural rolled into one. So seeing, and it's a complete 180 from a lot of black hesitancy towards magic. I know there's the hoodoo, voodoo, Louisiana association with magic, but generally the black experience has at least the American black experience has has a kind of keeps magic at an arm's length, and seeing that embraced in this show and used as a way to continue legacy and lineage in Lovecraft Country, I adored it. So, and it's encapsulated in that scene. It is also a very tragic scene, but it's encapsulated in that scene, which we'll get into. Like, hey, if you ever want to rewatch it with me, I'll definitely be down. Maybe a quorum watch or just like a separate watch. I'd be down for it. But why does that tie into the Tulsa? Why do I feel like both of these shows use, and I can give you the interviews and things that they talk about, but I want to just give you my personal pinpoint why I think they used the Tulsa massacre. Because I hate to use the cliche, but it's very apt here. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And there's a lot of people that don't know about Tulsa. They don't know about the house bombings in Philadelphia. Attacks, like we can go down the laundry list of state organized terror against black people that folks just don't realize how recent those things are. Again, Tulsa's 1921, so there are people that are alive that there may not be as many people alive. If there are people alive, there's probably like maybe one or two. But there's people that definitely were affected by that are still alive, or just at least a generation removed. That's just 1921. Let's just move it up to 1965 in the Civil Rights era, or we'll just go back a couple years where Lovecraft is actually set at. Even though they'd go back to Tulsa, that's a whole thing. We won't get into all that. But let's just do the 1940s where Lovecraft was mostly set. You still have people alive that witnessed everything that happened in the 40s. Their children are still alive. That witnessed or are affected by their parents and the things they experienced in the 40s, right? Now, in the black community, these things are very rich lessons and things that we are very aware of. Although in modern times, there definitely could be disconnects between black communities and folks that don't know things happen in different states and stuff like that. So that's definitely a possibility. Those things that happen. But generally with white audiences, like they were shocked that Tulsa happened. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't process it. And I'm like, that was in a book I had to read as a kid that my dad made sure I had in here, right? So it's not just necessarily when I say doomed to repeat it. The doomed to repeat it part isn't aimed at black people, because they've generally even if black folks had not known about Tulsa specifically, they wouldn't have doubted your story if you recounted it to them because of other experiences they've had in the nation. It just wouldn't be a shock. So this lesson is not necessarily aimed at them. It is empowering black folks in the usage of these moments of trying to glean something different from them than it had been in before, which is why I feel like the legacy part is so empowering from these two shows, is that this may have been a tragic moment for the families that were involved and died in this moment. But what can we take from this? What can we pass forward? And in Lovecraft, it's encapsulated in this scene that I've got pinned up here. And in Watchmen, it's Angela's journey, learning about her past. That encapsulates that. And by the end, she really understands what she didn't understand about her past, what that unlocks for her future, and then some cool things right there at the end of that last episode. So, I talked 2 weeks ago about Lena Waithe and racial terror, and the ways that sometimes the way she does it in her projects doesn't necessarily resonate with the black community the same way. The reason I think these two shows resonated because it empowered. So again, there's a legacy spot. There's definitely things we've heard before over and over again in this show. But I can give countless examples of Angela being black in the show, where it's like, that is a black woman doing black woman things, trying to figure this stuff out. There is so many countless examples in Lovecraft that even though they're in some racially tense scenes, because they're still, and some folks may still be uncomfortable with that. That's definitely a conversation we can have. But there's definitely some moments in that could have been handled poorly, and the character is empowered to get themselves out of it. There's not a white savior that comes in at the last moment and makes it better. It's all about a family of black people being discoverers, being explorers, being detectives, learning how to use magic together as a group, and then get themselves out of the situation, not their own situation, but get themselves out of the situation that was thrust upon them throughout history. That's amazing. That is awesome. And using the backdrop of Tulsa, where black people felt powerless, you're co-opting that, right? There's the Jackie Robinson baseball scene, and I can't say any more if you haven't watched Lovecraft. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. And just the rush of emotion that I felt watching that scene, I can't. I should talk about it more. Maybe I'll do a separate video so folks that know it or want to be spoiled I can dive into that more, of why I got teary-eyed, I've cried while rewatching that moment. I should have grabbed that photo too, because it does relate to where this scene happens here. That's the difference. You want to know the difference? Not that I want every single show to have historical racial terror. This is not me advocating for that. But if you are going to do it, these two shows are the case point for it. And it just, the way it can brought a massive spotlight onto these issues. Onto this historical event that had not been covered nearly enough. And I'm glad that Taryn posted the documentaries you can go check out, which I definitely recommend you do that. And we didn't watch them before we did Watchmen. We're taking a break next week, so we won't be doing that in between. Although I encourage you to go do that. This is not me saying you can't do it. You can go do that on your own. I'm just not leading anything on quorum that night for you to go do that. And I think it's highly important you watch those before you watch Lovecraft, because I think it can make, when that moment's come up in Lovecraft, that much more powerful and impactful. So yeah, I think this is gonna have a huge pop cultural impact going forward, and I think it's really laid a template for creators on how they can go forward and talk about these neglected moments in history in an exciting and invigorating way, that you can still enjoy it as an audience member, seeing these characters grow and grow in power, and not feel like they're just being tethered to a string of like despair and pain, right? That's incredibly important. So that's how Lenny Fitness says, Kenny's heart grew 3 times a day. It really did. That entire series, the first couple episodes, I was in so hard. I couldn't shut up about it. I was raving about it. So yeah, that day it grew. It had been growing, and then it just grew more and more on that day. Yeah. Taryn says, I was pissed that I first heard about the 1985 Philly bombing just last summer in my race and racism class, like whitewash history doing its damnedest to even hide recent events. Yeah, 1985. 1985. It's not that long ago. It's just a little older than I am completely. I'm 32. What was that, 35 years ago? Yeah. So that means my parents were alive, well alive, to understand what was happening then. Weren't kids anymore. They'd been in their 30s when that happened. Yeah, my dad would have been... I turned 33 this year, so my dad would have been 33 when that happened. That's crazy. And yeah, contrary to popular cliche belief, time does not heal all wounds. Time can take the sting out of it. Or if you mean like time will eventually win out, maybe. I don't know that for sure. Okay, because we're still falling into old dumb stuff as a human race. So no, I do not know that. I do not know that for sure will happen. All right. So that is the show. That is what I came to talk to you about. I came to like hype Lovecraft Country and Watchmen, take down Ellie Kemper a few notches. I kind of feel bad but there's other St. Louisans I can lift up and support. So take that L, Ellie. Ellie, take that L. Take that L. Well, don't forget, it's our anniversary this month at Nerd Union. We got old co-stars from the original crew of Nerd Union that are going to be coming back on the shows. Me, Jerry, and Steve will definitely do a Super Blerd Variety Hour together. Just get all the black folks on this show together. I'm sure that won't be chaotic whatsoever. We'll be loud, proud, and in charge. So Jerry will be back on the State of Nerd Union on Monday, co-hosting with Steve. I'll kind of pop back to producing that one on that night. So those two are going to do that. The week after that, me, Jerry, and Steve will do Magica. We talked about that. We teased that we were going to try to do the news while we play a game. I'm sure that won't be chaotic, but that'll be hilarious. So that'll be on the 14th. So on the 7th, Jerry comes back to do State Nerd Union. We got some other surprises in store with the old crew to come back and do we want to do like a round table panel discussion with the old crew. Get some of our old writers coming in, just chatting about their experiences, because it has not been a perfect experience running the site. It's just because we've had full-time jobs and all of that. So it's definitely a very true thing. I am going to be out of town next week, so we will still have shows, but some of them might be pre-recorded. Commander Shipp show, we are going to record that on Sunday with me and Tom. So I know we've been off for a few weeks, but we'll get back to doing that on Sunday. So you don't have to look for that towards Wednesdays anymore. We will be getting back to doing that on Sundays. We'll figure out what the new time is going to be, though. So kind of bear with us on that. Tomorrow afternoon, me and Taryn record the Rundown. That's Taryn's news update show to get you ready for the weekend. Give you all the news we might have missed throughout the week. So super excited for that. And that usually comes out Sunday night, Saturday morning. We've recorded on Fridays, but usually Friday night, Saturday afternoon. So, and Taryn says they're working on the Rundown script right now. Cool. Later in June, we'll have a special. We will go back to our normal movie club. So we'll have our Patreon only movie club and our open to everyone movie club. So we'll have both of those this month. We know we didn't do it in May just because we had a lot going on, but definitely we're going to have one where we get the old crew together to chat with you. And we'll riff on a movie together during both sessions. So we'll definitely make that special for both our patrons and our non-patrons. No word on what the movie is yet, although knowing my crew, we're going to let you vote, but I have a feeling that the ones we'll put forward, there's just some movies that, as the old crew, just loved to rewatch and get into, that we might press y'all like, if you want to hear us go off on a movie, you might want to pick this one. So we're still leaving it up to our patrons, but we'll put that out. We have a backlog of things. Taryn just got done with finals, so we're working through a bunch of articles. Me and Taryn will knock out some articles. And we've got some new members that we'll be introducing soon that have joined and getting some content out for you as well. So the movie sphere, I've got reviews to get caught up on and written. Logan has been diligently knocking out reviews. So it's going to be a really good month to check out Nerd Union. We are 6 years old, y'all. We are 6 years old. We didn't celebrate our 5th last year during the pandemic. So this month is kind of our 5-6 year celebration in honor of that. And I think it's going to be a blast. So yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, it's going to be good. This has been Super Blerd Variety Hour. I am Commander Shipp. Lenny says, still got all your baby teeth. Yeah, we do. You ain't wrong. All right. Thank you all for joining us. As always, big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Shelby Johnson, Vici, Doug Schumann, Nell Cherry. Thank you for your support every month. We always appreciate that. And we will see you next time. If you have not hit subscribe, if you've been watching this and you're a new time viewer to Nerd Union, make sure you hit that subscribe button on either Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. That always helps us out.